Hello. Hi. My name is Bharat Gotoskar, and I'm the founder of Khaki Tours. And what we'll be doing now is going to have a virtual tour of the Kala Ghoda area. You'll be hosted by one of our team members, Vinayak Talwar. Vinayak is a HR professional on weekdays, and on weekends, he takes people around the city. He's a Dilliwala who shows Mumbaikars what their city is all about. So over to Vinayak. I won't take much of time. Over to Vinayak.
Hi, very good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining in for this virtual walk that we'll be having today of the Kala Ghoda precinct. These are very interesting times where we're all getting used to virtual reality. And for the next 1 hour, I'm going to have a little bit of fun with you all as I show you an area which I'm sure you're very familiar with as a part of the Kala Ghoda festival, but getting to know a little bit more about this particular precinct, especially from a historical perspective. So on that note, I'll start sharing my screen. Okay, great. So I hope you all can see my screen. And this virtual walk is called Horsing Around, which is basically a virtual heritage walk of the Kala Ghoda precinct. And I am a representative of Khaki Tours who will be taking you through this journey. So quickly, let's get started with this walk. And the first thing that I'll be doing is giving you a little bit of a geography introduction to Mumbai. So I'm sure this is how Mumbai looks to you all when you see it on Google Maps. And if I were to just talk about Mumbai as a city, this is basically, of course, just South Mumbai, which you also identify as Sobo. Now, if I were to take you back 300 years from now, looking at this geography, it would have looked slightly different. This is what it would have looked like. Mumbai or South Mumbai, to be specific, comprised of 7 islands. And I'm sure many of you have already heard about this fact as well. If I were to just name these 7 islands for you, they were called Mahim, Parel, Worli, Mazgaon, Bombay, Little Colaba, and Colaba. So while looking at it, if you're a resident of South Mumbai, you can probably judge whether are you on land or are you on sea 300 years ago. Now, for this particular walk, we will be specifying on one particular island, which is the island of Bombay, the edge-shaped island that you see there, and concentrating on the eastern face of this island. And I have just taken that same section in today's map as well, and we're going to zoom in on this now. So there you have it. That is the eastern face of Bombay Island, and you can see a little bit of a jagged edge on the southern part of it. That is what we'll be focusing on. And to be specific, if you were to take it in today's context, that is what it looks like today. And what I'm going to be doing now is focusing on this particular area and looking at it, what it comprises of today as well. So as we zoom in further into this particular section, let's see the area that we'll be covering today. Voila, and you are at the Kala Ghoda precinct. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with this precinct as much in detail, don't worry. I will be a little bit more thorough in giving you a direction as to where exactly and what you will be seeing. The intent is to make it as actual as possible, as if you were walking those streets by yourself. Now, if I were to probably look in the direction that I'm showing you in this arrow, I will want to show you what exactly it looks like if you see it today. That is the image that you will see if you're standing today in the Kala Ghoda precinct and looking towards 2 buildings that you see in front of you. I will tell you more about these buildings. However, had you been here, say around 200 years from now, this scene would have been quite different. And this is what it would have looked like. So you can see some things over here. There's a vast open space on the right. There are many tents on the left. You can see some sort of a fortification. and there are cannons that are present. So believe it or not, had you been standing there, you would have seen this particular area to be something like this. So what is it that I'm talking about? Well, let's get to find that out. Now, today, if you see the Kala Ghoda from a different angle, this is what it looks like, right? And we'll be covering different aspects that you see around here. And as I mentioned, this is the Kala Ghoda. Now, the name black is what, of course, Kala means over here. But if I were to again consider this area, say 200 years ago, you would consider a different color with this area, not Kala, but Hara, because this area was called the Apollo Green. Green basically refers to a vast expanse of land that is present usually for various purposes, such as trading or anything else. This was the large expanse outside an area which we call as the fort. So what is this fort area that I'm talking about? Well, let's find out. This is the Fort of Bombay. So if you recall those jagged edges which I had shown you in the map earlier, that was referring to the Fort of Bombay, because the English had actually taken over the island of Bombay, and some say even probably the 7 islands altogether, and they had established their base over here as a part of the East India Company. Now, some of you already know this history lesson where I talk about how the 7 islands of Bombay, originally under the Portuguese, were then handed over to the British in the 1600s. Well, just fast forwarding a little bit over there, when the British actually arrived on this island, they realized that there's a natural harbor where they can establish a port over here. And in this port, just to defend themselves and also at the same time invite communities from India and abroad to settle and trade, they established this fortification for their protection. Now, you must remember, these are going to be people who are wealthy, who could afford to actually live inside the protection of the fort. Those who could not afford to live inside the fort were actually living in a far-off area called the native town. In today's context, you would consider those areas such as Bhuleshwar, Dongri, Girgaon, just to name a few. Now, when I'm talking about the fort, I want you to make sure your alignment is right, because the north is on the right-hand side, which means that the south is on the left. So the right is the north and south is on the left. And the European enclave of the fort was the southern area of the fort. The northern part was largely where the native community stayed, Parsis, various communities from Gujaratis, Bori Muslims, and so on. So if I'm focusing on the south area of the fort, which is going to be our area today, is what will be in question. It was just the southern tip of this particular fort area, which we will be focusing upon. Some lanes inside the fort and some part which is outside the fort as well. And the view that I just showed you is something like this, of what you saw as the Apollo Green. So let's find out, what did it look like? You saw the Apollo Green, which was actually outside the fort. What did it look like inside the fort as well? So this is what you saw earlier, the Apollo Green. What I'm going to do is just move your gaze a little bit to the left and make you realize what you will see inside the fort. And there you have it. This is what the inside of the fort used to once look like. By now, what you realize is that the fort walls are not there. That is because around the 1860s, the English decided to then break down the fort walls and expand the city even further. Now, what I'm going to be showing you, of course, is something which is in today's context and what it looks like now. And that is what you see today. So can you see a little bit of similarity in what you saw, say, 150 years back and what you see here today? Well, this is now what we will be covering, which is very locally called as the Kala Ghoda precinct. But we'll get to that story in a bit. Now, there you have it. That is the Kala Ghoda precinct, which we'll be covering. And this is our route for today. So we'll be covering 20 spots. And the intent is to be able to give you bits and pieces of each of these spots as we go on through our virtual walk. So if you're all ready, let's get started. First point that we'll be covering is this particular statue that you see over here in front of you. And let's find out what it looks like if you were to take a 360-degree view standing at the base of the statue. As you can see, it's a very, very nice day and it's lovely to be outside. Well, let's give you an idea as to how lovely we can actually find this weather to be as we go through our journey. So you had a 360-degree view of the area. And let's talk about this statue in question to be specific. So this is the statue to be specific. This is called the Spirit of Kala Ghoda. Now, this statue is not a very old one. It was installed, in fact, in 2017, but basically commemorates this festival that we're all a part of, which is in fact the Kala Ghoda festival. On probably any other occasion, if you'd been a part of the Kala Ghoda festival, this is what you would have been a part of. The lovely decorations, the stalls, so many events happening, and so many people coming together from different parts of the city and sometimes even India to witness this grand event. Now, while today, of course, Kala Ghoda lies empty, considering we're in a pandemic, however, let's try to get some fun out of it nonetheless. So this is what the Kala Ghoda festival would have otherwise looked like. And today, of course, we are unlocked. So Kala Ghoda Arts Festival is unlocked from the 6th to the 14th of February. And today being the first day, we've started with one of our heritage events, and we'll be having a few more later on as well. But speaking of heritage walks, for the last 3 years, we've been conducting heritage walks for the Kala Ghoda Arts Festival. And these are just glimpses of some of our walks that happened over the last 2 years, and we had 10 different routes that we were covering in and around the Kala Ghoda area. Anyway, let's move on and talk ahead. Let's come to point number 2. So this is where we walk and come to point number 2. Some of you have recognized this restaurant. It's a chain of restaurants called the Punjab Grill. However, I will not be talking about the history of Punjab Grill, but what used to be here not too long back. And this actually goes back to a story more than 100 years from now, when this was something called as the Wayside, and Rampart Row is the stretch on which it existed. Now, the Wayside itself, as you read the advertisement over here, was a modern English inn. And the language is quite amazing, that it's where it says that you can call in for a drink or a meal, visit the Wayside, and which introduces you to a comfortable and pleasing English inn, which is quiet and exclusive, directed by Mrs. Edwards. Now, Mrs. Edwards was a woman who was running this Wayside inn for quite some time. However, they changed hands, and in the 1930s, it actually went under a Parsi family. And this is what then it looked like not too long back. And from the 1930s, it was in existence till the early 2000s, in fact, and used to have variety of visitors from all walks of life coming in and spending some time. Just to mention a few of the noted people who have come to the Wayside Inn. One of them is the very legendary Behram Contractor, or Busy Bee. So Behram Contractor is very well known for his afternoon courier and dispatch, and where he had a column as well called Round and About. Now, while of course Behram Contractor is no more, but his legacy has survived even to this day, where he has been such a lover of Mumbai as a city that you can find his writings in various different columns. This is Behram Contractor having a meal at the Wayside Inn with his wife. And as you can see, while there are 2 people sitting there, it looks like at least 6 people could have had that meal. But there is another gentleman which I wanted to talk about, who was a constant visitor to the Wayside Inn. And this person would sit at table number 4, is what the legend goes like, and would be continuously writing on drafts of paper and ordering his pots of tea. And one would just wonder what exactly is going on. Well, that man actually was drafting something quite important, and it was nothing else but the Constitution of India. So, if you've all not guessed it by now, the person we're referring to is Dr. Ambedkar, in fact, right? So, the story is quite popular. If you ever do hear about the Wayside Inn, is about Dr. Ambedkar sitting in the Wayside Inn, drafting the Constitution of India in Kala Ghoda. Unfortunately, the Wayside Inn, of course, does not exist anymore, but these are the stories that we still have with us. Let's move on from point number 2 to point number 3, which is right next door. And another iconic institution that lies there is the Rhythm House. Rhythm House is at a very beautiful corner where it is located, and is said to be an iconic place for music, because it is said that even the janitor there had a good knowledge of music, who could recommend what is it that you would like to listen to. And it is said that many celebrities, especially from the music world, would have visited it, known for its great collection of records, CDs, cassettes, and you name it. In addition to that, people could actually use a jukebox that was present over there in the Rhythm House, of course, listen to the best songs. However, in this digital age where music is now, of course, largely available online, Rhythm House could not survive that, and a few years back, in fact, shut its doors as well. So the Wayside Inn and the Rhythm House currently, of course, no more operational. But there was a plan to revive the Rhythm House as well, and we're hoping that someday it will open up. Let's move on further now. Now, what I'm just showing you over here, if you recall, was the same image earlier of the fort area. And if you've not realized, that particular corner which you see in front of you is where the Rhythm House stands. But in this image, as you can see, there's an open garden there. So whose garden is it that you're seeing? Well, we'll find out very, very soon. But for that, let's move in from point number 3 to point number 4 as we enter into a lane called VB Gandhi Marg. All right. Now, VB Gandhi Road, why is it called so? Well, it is named after Vitthal Balakrishna Gandhi, who was actually responsible for taking over the municipality of Bombay when the British had left in 1947. He went on to make many contributions to society. But one of his most notable, yet probably not known contributions is something that I'm sure most of you have already used it in your lives. Well, what happened was that once the Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru approached VB Gandhi saying that there must be a way to probably make identification of cabs easier. And what does Mr. VB Gandhi do? Well, he doesn't go black or white, just like this image. He goes for Kali Pili. And yes, he is the one who introduces the Kali Pili concept to identify cabs. And of course, most iconic Kali Pilis are the Fiat. And to actually mention about that story, we're very sorry to see that the Fiat Kali Pili is also now going to be off the streets. And this is an ad made by Amul commemorating that as well. Now let's enter into VB Gandhi Road and find out what it is all about. But in addition to that, this street was earlier known as something else. It was called Forbes Street. And what is great to know is that a sign still survives on that lane mentioning the old name of this street. So we've taken a turn now, and as we enter into Forbes Street or VB Gandhi Marg, we'll see what is going to be the next point and what connect does it have to this old name of Forbes. Be careful. As you can see, there are some vehicles going down the road. And just do realize if you're not able to hear the audio, we've done that intentionally. So don't think that your audio is not working. Great. So we're looking at this yellow house in front of you all, and let's try to find out what this house is all about. This actually was the house of Charles Forbes. And Charles Forbes, who is this gentleman and why is he so important to have a street named after him? Well, the answer lies in a building not too far from here, which is called the Asiatic Society. Now, in the Asiatic Society, I'm sure many of you have recognized this building and especially taken a selfie or some photograph. Is an iconic institution that houses statues of many people who were administrators or were running the government during the British times, but also Indians as well. However, Charles Forbes is a combination of both these because his statue that stands inside the Asiatic Society has actually been built by the donation of multiple Indians in Bombay as well. And if you can read the fine text, it talks about Sir Charles Forbes Baronet, the disinterested benefactor of the native inhabitants of this island, the tried and trusted friend of the people of India erected in token of esteem and gratitude by the native inhabitants of Bombay in 1841. Which really goes on to show that despite not being an administrator, Charles Forbes was just another businessman who had come to India in the late 1700s looking for fortunes, just like his other family members had done, trading in canvas. But the amount that he had been able to actually donate back to the society while he was doing all this actually led to the erection of this statue when he left Bombay. And this is one of those rare English statues that actually have Gujarati written on them. You usually not have any other language mentioned, but this is one such fine example of the dedication to Charles Forbes. And hence, what you saw in front of you, that yellow house, was the location where Charles Forbes once stayed. Also on the wall of this house is this very beautiful mural of not a Kala Ghoda, but a colored Ghoda, I would say. So this Rangeen Ghoda that you see is a very popular spot for people to take photographs of themselves as well. Great. Moving on, we will now move to point 5, which is right next door to this building that you call as Jatiya Chambers. Now, if you were to go to the second floor of this particular building, you will find yourself facing a signboard which reads something like this. All right, this is French, by the way. And what is a French signboard doing over here? Well, basically, it represents a French library that exists right there on the second floor of this building, founded as early as 1886. So what is the name of a gentleman doing here, which you can see as Dinshaw Pettit? For those of you who probably don't know Dinshaw Pettit is this gentleman that you see over here. On the right, in fact, is his statue very close to the CSMT station as well, in an area called the Bhatia Bagh. Dinshaw Pettit was considered to be another individual who contributed a lot to the society. He was also one of the people who opened up one of the first cotton mills in Mumbai, but also at the same time donated a lot of his money for other causes as well, including this particular clause where it is said cause where there were a set of students who were looking to create a French literary club, and to help them, he actually donated money for setting up this library. Now, it is quite ironical that a man who actually has a French name as a surname, Pettit, actually translates to small, has actually donated to a French cause over here as well. And the legend goes that he got the name Pettit because one of his ancestors was considered to be very short in height, and the French gave him that particular title, and he bears it very proudly, as you can see under his statue and on that library as well. But if you ever do get a chance to go inside this library, you will be seeing this beautiful scenes in front of you, as if time has stopped still inside this space. This is one particular view, and this is the other view. It's not a very big library, but it's a fascinating treasure to have in front. Great. Let's move on now from point number 5 to point number 6. If you see things moving a little bit too much, don't worry. It's just the camera. There's nothing else wrong that's happening. We're trying to be as realistic as possible, as you can see. Now, what you see on the left and on the right, as you reach this cross section, is actually a lane called as Rope Walk Lane. Today, it's called Sai Baba Marg. But why was it called Rope Walk Lane? Well, because this particular activity used to happen in this lane. Because ships were not too far from where we are standing, this was an area that was used to create ropes by two people standing at two ends of the lane and actually then coiling the ropes together. And that's why the name the Rope Walk Lane was given. And even now you can see certain shops still having Rope Walk Lane written over there. On Rope Walk Lane, you have another grand institution, which brings me to point number 7. You see this grand structure in front of you? Well, this is a synagogue. And a synagogue refers to which community? Yes, you're right, the Jewish community. So this particular area of Fort was also a Jewish quarter. And there were many wealthy Jews who were actually living over here. Let me talk a little bit more about this particular synagogue that you see in front of you. This is the Neset Eliyahu, or the Eliyahu synagogue. Now, if you were to look at this synagogue probably sometime back, this is what it would have looked like, largely painted in white. But over time, of course, it got different shades on it. And at one point in time, did not look very well in its state. However, recently, it has been restored. And this is what the synagogue looks like today. And it's a very beautiful building where you can actually go inside and see the various aspects of a synagogue. Let me just show you a couple of images what is inside the synagogue as well. So this is the plaque, which is you find at the entry of the synagogue, and you find a certain name that is mentioned over there, that this house of prayer was erected by Jacob Elias David Sassoon, his brothers in memory of their late father Elias. So Eliyahu is what Elias is being referred to over here. And this name, David Sassoon, is going to come multiple times in this walk as well. But this is just to give you an idea of the presence of the certain set of Jews, to be specific, called the Baghdadi Jews. That means they came in from Iraq, and when they were facing prosecution, especially in the early 1800s, is when they migrated to India, and especially coming to Bombay. Jews are currently present in different parts of India, and Bombay, of course, is one of the major cities as well. Today, of course, there are not many Baghdadi Jews there, but yet when the time is right, they do try to have a congregation of Jews for the services to take place. This is the lovely view that you see inside when you are at the synagogue. And these all synagogues are supposed to face towards Jerusalem, which is, of course, their holy land. And the Old Testament of the Bible is something that is put on the top of every synagogue as well. And as I mentioned, there is the minimum quorum that is required for services to take place. Another very fascinating aspect inside a synagogue is you will find an immersion pool, which is called the mikveh. Now, this immersion pool is, of course, used for certain rituals where you have to completely immerse yourself. It wouldn't have looked like this originally. This has been tiled up to make sure it doesn't get too dirty, but still very much in use even today. Another very interesting reference to Jews in this area is actually once there used to be a Jewish club not too far from this synagogue, which now, of course, has shut its doors, but we were able to get a photograph of this particular club sign, which now also has disappeared. We'll come to the Jews a little later as well. For now, let's move from point number 7 ahead to point number 8. So we are walking further down VV Gandhi Marg. Be careful if there are any cars coming, you have to make sure you're on the side. Oh, there you have it. Yeah, hope you're all okay. Let's move on ahead to the next cross section that you see in front of you. And we now turn our gaze to the left. This is a street called as Nagindas Master Street, but at one point was called the Meadow Street, also formerly known as the Angrezi Bazaar, which means that this would be considered, comparison to London's Oxford Street, this would be the high street of the Fort of Bombay, where all the Europeans, the English, would come and buy different exotic items that they would find. So you would be having traders also coming from all around the world to sell to these Europeans, from the wines of Italy to the Italian bakers, to the French, in fact, actually being the bakers, to Arabs, in fact, coming to trade in carpets. And one of the famous items that the Arabs would also trade in, which was very popular with the British, was none other than the hookah. So one of the prized commodities that would be sold on Meadow Street. The first photo studios, cinematographs sprang up on the street along with many, many other firsts. However, of course, with time going by, this now is not really a very upmarket street. But today, with the gentrification of the fort area, it's again rising up with many new stores coming up on Meadow Street as well. So life has come full circle almost for the Meadow Street. Now, let's move on from point number 8 down this particular street to point number 9. So we are now leaving Meadow Street and going down this road. You can see there are a few food joints nearby, and you can see the iconic Carter's Blue right there. You can probably smell the shawarma coming to your nostrils, I'm sure, but we'll avoid ourselves from stopping over there for now. But what is interesting to know is that this lane has a connection to food even now. So let's find out what that is. So as we stop over here, we've actually entered into a lane called the Bakehouse Lane. Now, why Bakehouse Lane? Is because within the fort, the governor of Bombay was the most important person over there. And for his house, of course, had to be very centrally located within the fort region. And it was just around the Kala Ghoda area where there was a point where he used to stay. So catering to the governor was this particular bakery, which was called the Bakehouse. We don't know the exact location of where this bakehouse was located, but the name still has survived to some extent. Of course, this lane has also been renamed, but the legacy of food, as I just mentioned over there, still continues. Great. Moving down Bakehouse Lane, let's now come out from there and see where is it that we're going to end up. To point number 10. That's where we came in from. We're going to turn ourselves to the right. You can see another Ghoda mural on the left, a horse mural. And we're going to exit out of the Bakehouse Lane. And what you realize is all through this while you've been winding through the narrow streets of what used to be the Fort of Bombay. But as you come out, you will suddenly see a vast expanse available in front of you. And that is because you have stepped out of what used to be the fort area. And we will now then talk about various institutions outside the fort as well, which includes, in fact, our next particular stop. You can see some barricades over there present. There's probably a good chance that they were preparing for the Kala Ghoda festival, maybe at some other year. But anyway, let's look at this domed building that you have in front of you. This domed building is actually the rear side of a very interesting institution, which has to do with an event that took place in 1905. And this is the event I'm talking about. You all probably know that currently today, Prince Charles is the Prince of Wales. But in 1905, who was the Prince of Wales? Well, he was somebody who actually then went on to become a king, and a very important king for India, because he was the first king to ever come to India. His name was George V. However, when he came to Bombay as a prince, there was a royal procession, of course, that took place that you see right over here. But there was another very interesting event that took place. And that is what I'm talking about over here. This is actually a foundation stone being laid. And if you see the surrounding buildings right there, you can recognize that this is the Kala Ghoda precinct where all of this is happening. So what is this event? Well, it is so iconic that this particular exact photo frame got captured in an engraving as well. And this is that engraving that I'm talking about of the foundation stone being laid. But where exactly is this engraving? Well, it is at the base of the statue of the Prince of Wales, who I had just mentioned some time back. Now, why am I talking about the Prince of Wales? Well, because this foundation stone that was laid was actually for an event to inaugurate, eventually, something which was based on the Gol Gumbaz of Bijapur in terms of its style and architecture. And one of the most famous architects around that time were called in to actually design this building, which goes on to become the CSMPS, or what was formerly known as the Prince of Wales Museum. This has a style called the Indo-Saracenic style. Indo means Hindu, Saracen means Muslim, and they basically combine together to create this style. So while the exterior looks like the Gol Gumbaz of Bijapur in certain parts, the interior, in fact, looks like a Maratha Wada as well, and is one of the finest museums in Western India present today. Not the first museum of Mumbai. First museum is a separate one called the Dr. Bhawdaji Lad Museum. But anyway, we'll not go there for now. I'll come to that museum later in this walk. So this, of course, was the Prince of Wales Museum that was inaugurated in the early 1900s by the man I mentioned earlier. Now, what you saw was point number 10 right there in front of you. However, what I'm going to do is turn around and have a look on this particular side where the arrow is pointing. Now, if you see over here, you can see actually Bakehouse Lane where you just came out from, and a building on the right and a building on the left. So let's first talk about the building on the right, which is going to be point number 11. Today on point number 11 stands particular this building, which is the Adore House. Now, not many people are aware that the Adore House actually is probably the first instance of arts actually coming to this particular area. And that is because of one of the reasons why is because of this particular institution, which is the Bombay Arts Society. The Bombay Arts Society, of course, was not founded here. It was founded in 1888, somewhere in the native town, probably the Girgaon area. And the society's main objective were to encourage art, especially among amateurs, and to promote the appreciation of art among the citizens of Bombay. However, around the 1940s, the Bombay Art Society set up something called as the Bombay Art Society Salon, which actually was a venue for people to display their works of art as well. And that happened in none other than the Adore House. And this photo is a testament to the Adore House actually playing a big role, because at that particular venue, you see this very iconic photograph being taken in 1947, when some of the greatest artists known at that point in time had put up a display of their various works. And of course, you see a few names mentioned over here, such as Gaitonde, Souza, Raza, Ara, Hussain, of course, referring to M.F. Hussain, who were all present at the salon displaying these works of art. But they all come together to create something more interesting and exciting. And that is quite amazing to know, is because of the efforts of a Jew, a German Jew, who had actually escaped Germany just 2 years before World War actually struck in around the 1940s. And his name was Rudy Von Laden. Rudy Von Laden plays a big role in actually creating the progressive arts group, which actually then, of course, becomes the sole body entity that exists of various forms of arts to then thrive in the city as well. And Rudy Von Laden, of course, is seen in this photograph with all the people I just mentioned a little while ago. You see Hussain right over there at the left, in case you were trying to find him as well. So Rudy Von Laden was one of the few people who actually came in from abroad, supported arts in the city and helped it grow even further. What happened just a few years later after the progressive art group is created, I will just talk about in a while. But for now, let's move on to our next spot. That is the building on the left, which is point number 12. Now, this is what used to be the offices of David Sassoon. And I told you I will mention David Sassoon again. And look at this beautiful structure that stands over there. Now, let me show you what has become of this building today. And you move from 11 to 12. And that is what survives this structure, which is called as the Oricon House. Now, while there's nothing much to appreciate in this building today, what is a lesser known fact is that the top floor, the terrace of Oricon House, is used for many shoots in Hindi movies especially. So just to give you an idea, this is a still from the movie PK, and you can recognize Anushka Sharma right there. And on the left is the dome of the CSMBS. So which basically has been shot at the Oricon House. Great. Let us now move on from there to point number 13. And there you are facing something called as the Max Miller Bhavan. So who is Max Miller? Well, it's quite fascinating how this entire area has connects from various things that we mentioned in the past. So we spoke about Jews, and then we spoke about the German Jew. Now let's speak about a German. So Max Muller was of German descent, and this is his face right there on an India stamp, which means he did something quite significant to have a building named after him. And by the way, there are Max Muller bhavans present in different parts of India. In fact, Delhi also has one, just to mention, by the way. So what did Max Muller do? Well, Max Muller was a German scholar in the 1800s who was responsible for translating the Rig Vedas among many of his achievements. And this, in fact, is his work that you see, is the Rig Veda Santa, the sacred hymns of the Brahmins translated and explained by F. Max Muller. So there you have it. And this, so basically cultural institutes, especially related to German, have been named Max Muller in this city. But this institute, if you were to probably come sometime in the past and see a board that would be present in front of the Max Muller Bhavan, which would read something like this. Okay, I'm sure it sounds Greek. Well, it's not Greek, it's German. But what is being spoken over here, if anybody probably guessed it right, yes, one word would have given it to you, which is Khandala. So this is actually a Kya Bolti Tu song written in German. So the idea was to promote German among the masses as well. And this is one way in which you could actually learn German and sing it out in a completely different form. Now, why am I talking about this? Is because the Max Muller Bhavan also has something called as the Goethe Institute. Goethe Institute is again a German institute usually used for promotion of the German language, and this is present in different parts of India as well, similar to what Alliance Française is in French. Great, let's move on now and talk about something which is on the opposite side of the Max Muller Bhavan, which is point number 14. So point number 14, you will find yourself facing the Chetna Veg Restaurant. So Chetna Veg Restaurant, of course, is a very popular place for thalis today, not just the Gujarati thali, but you can have Maharashtrian and Rajasthani thalis over here as well. But this was not all that Chetna has been about. This is what Chetna used to look at one point in time. So before all the hipster cafes that came up in Kala Ghoda, trying to copy the European cafes abroad, this was established in 1946 and would be considered as the hotbed of arts movement well before the other institutions actually came up. You must remember, this is around the same time the progressive arts group is also at that time thriving. Now, today cafes might be emulating different kinds of cafes that you see abroad, but this had a lot of focus on Indian culture. So be it its books, be it its jewelries, be it its clothing and saris, all of them would be very focused on the Indian culture that they were trying to promote through this particular venue. And as I mentioned about the books, there's a bookstore even today present inside this restaurant, which many people are not aware about, but was very, very popular among the masses, focusing largely on Indian culture. So you should definitely, if you're going to Chetna for a veg thali, try to go and see a book over there as well. Great. Let's move on now from point number 14 to point number 15. And as you can see, we have taken a circle and come back to the same place where we started. And you're facing one of the most, again, recognizable institutions in the area called the Jahangir Arts Gallery. So what was started in the 1940s by the Bombay Arts Society was really then pushed even further by the setting up of the Jahangir Art Gallery. Now, what people don't know is that before this gallery was set up, this is what that spot used to look like, right next to the Prince of Wales Museum. As of course, then came 1952 is when the gallery was set up. And this is a very iconic image, in fact. On the left, you see the Jahangir of Jahangir Art Gallery, a very illustrious Parsi by the name of Kawasti Jahangir, whose family have donated many different institutions in Bombay as well. This being one of the more latest ones, is actually meeting a very famous painter called S.L. Hardankar. S.L. Hardankar was actually a person who was practicing painting, not in this particular area, but the first or the original arts district of Bombay, which is in and around the Girgaon stretch. However, I will not talk much about that because that is being covered by my colleague Mrigank in a separate talk. But this is an iconic photo is because this is where the new is meeting the old, especially in the world of arts. And this was a commemoration, in fact, was of Hardankar's School of Art, where they had displayed the different works at the Jahangir Art Gallery. And this was, in fact, the gallery, what it looked like around the 70s, inaugurated in 1952. And one of the more iconic places inside the art gallery, apart from, of course, the paintings, was this cafe called Cafe Samovar, which is very popular among the masses. Celebrities would come over here. Movies have been shot over here. Just to give an example, Ek Choti Si Baat as well. And unfortunately, again, Cafe Samovar also does not survive and has been closed down. This is what that same stretch looks like today. It is a place for art to be displayed, but I think this time we should have let probably the cafe survive. Great. Let's move on from point number 15 to point number 16. And as you move your gaze from the Jahangir Art Gallery, you come face to face with this particular structure on your right. This, of course, is the art gallery. And there you have it. Probably an institution that has come from the world of Harry Potter. This is the Elfinstein College. Now, the Elfinstein College was founded as early as the early 1800s, but this was not where it was based out of. It was based out of this particular building. If you have not recognized this building, this still stands. This is present in Baikala, just opposite the Dr. Bhav Dajilard Museum, which I had mentioned earlier. Today, it is the railway hospital, but this was where the Elfinstein College originally then started as an institute. Later on, VJTI also then started from here as well. Now, there are many people who are notable alumni of the Elfinstein College, just to name a few: J.N. Tata, B.R. Ambedkar, Dadabhai Nauroji, just a few examples over here, including Lokmanya Tilak as well. Now, what people don't realize is inside the Elfinstein College, that building which I showed you earlier, is also the Maharashtra State Archives. And that includes many important documents with respect to Bombay, along with this particular document, which is actually the Queen's proclamation that had been read out, Queen Victoria, in 1858, basically announcing that Bombay is not, or even not Bombay, just the entire region of India is not under the East India Company, but under the Crown. And this document had been read out in Bombay on the steps of the town hall for the Asiatic Society. Let's go on from point number 16. And what I'm going to be doing is viewing our next three spots in one go itself. And that's the Elfinstein College that you just saw. And there you have it, building number 1, building number 2, and building number 3. These are the same three buildings which I just showed you. What did they look like, say, around 150 years back? Something like this. Not much has changed, except, of course, the building in the middle. So let's cover now these one by one. Let's go to point number 17. Point number 17 is the David Sassoon Library, one of the most beautiful buildings in this particular area. Originally, this particular library actually was called the Mechanics Institute, because that's what it was founded as. And the Bombay Mechanics Institute wasn't always here. It was present in the docks area, which is not too far. Later on, David Sassoon, who was a very famous businessman, and I'll talk to him in a bit, talk about him in a bit, he contributed money to this particular institute, and not he, but his family contributed money to this institute, and actually the name got associated, and soon enough it was then renamed to the library and the reading room. Who is David Sassoon? Well, that is David Sassoon, and he was a Baghdadi Jew who came in around the early 1800s and was someone who didn't know the local language. He did not know English, but when he died, he actually died one of the richest people in the lands in and around as well. Now, how did he do so? Well, because he was a very good trader and he knew the ways of wealth as well. One of the commodities, in fact, that he was trading in was opium. Now, at that point, opium was not really illegal, and hence he was able to really trade very effectively with China and made a lot of wealth. But at the same time, his family donated a lot of money for various purposes as well. This library being one, the Sassoon docks that I just mentioned, the synagogue which I just showed you earlier as well. This, in fact, is his house in Baikala. Today, this location is where the Masina Hospital is. But at one point, it was this residence called Sans Souci, or Without Any Worries. This actually has been decked up to commemorate Queen Victoria. Now what you see over here are his children, and as time went by, they also adopted to Western methods. So what you probably would have earlier called as Abdullah, as one of his sons, went on to become Albert. And Albert Sassoon then goes on to donate a lot of money for various purposes. Let's also now come to what he did donate to in a bit. This is his statue, which you will see if you go inside the library even today. A very quiet place to sit and read a book if you'd like to, in the hustle and bustle, of course, of Mumbai. Next, we come to point number 18, which is right next door. This is the Army and Navy building. Army and Navy building is named so is because it housed the Army and Navy stores. But if you see this particular image, this was actually not being used as that back then. It was actually used as the municipal offices. So what you know today as the BNC building, where in fact we are doing tours as we speak, this was the earlier location of the municipal offices present. But then, of course, it was relocated. And Army and Navy stores opened up here. But not just here, the main branch being London, but present in Bombay, in Calcutta, and in Delhi as well. So after the Angrez Bazaar, Army and Navy became a very popular place for people to shop as well. And finally, well, not finally, penultimately, we come to point number 19, which actually has a story associated to this painting. So if you go to England and go to a place called Castle Carrick, you will find this painting over there. Now, why this painting is there is because this painting basically described what would become as one of the greatest hotels in Bombay. What does this building look like today is a very different story. And let me show you what it looks like. That. It's quite surprising, but that is what it is. This is Watson's Hotel. The Watson's Hotel was founded in the 1860s by a pair of brothers who were actually tailors living within the fort area. And when the fort walls were demolished, this piece of real estate became for them where they would build one of the finest European hotels in the city, a whites only hotel as well. Now let me show you what it used to look like in its prime. This is the Watson's Esplanade Hotel. Now, this is me just zooming in and showing you the sign as well. Now, Watson's Esplanade Hotel was quite famous, not just because of the way it had been built, but that is quite a story because it was a prefabricated structure that had been made in England and shipped over here and was put up together like a Lego set, which is way ahead of its time compared to the kind of buildings that you were seeing before. What you saw earlier, like the David Sassoon Library, was a style called the Gothic style of architecture, similar to what you saw in Elfinstein College as well. This was a very different industrialized design that had been used to put together what almost looked like a bird cage had been put up. And you can see the Apollo green right there behind over you on the other side as well. Well, let's move on now and talk that what exactly also happened in the 1890s in this particular institution. Well, this iconic event happened. Watson's Hotel was screening at the price of ₹1 for people to come and see the entry of a cinematograph, arrival of a train, sea ball, demolition, leaving the factory. Why would someone pay money to see all of these? Well, because this was happening for the very first time in Asia. The presence of a cinematograph, a moving picture, which people had never ever heard about. And that took place right here at the Watson's Hotel, thanks to these two people, the Lumiere brothers, who sent a representative to Bombay to actually show this particular movie. And history was basically created because that is where the inspiration took to then create movies within Indians themselves, of course, you know, such as Dada Saheb Phalke, and well, so as to speak, the creation of Bollywood. Now, there are many stories associated with the Watson's Hotel. One of the more legendary ones is that since it was a whites-only hotel, they did not allow the entry to a certain Parsi gentleman. And because of that, he was so adamant on revenge, he said that I will build the grandest hotel there is. And he goes on to build the Taj Mahal Palace Hotel. And that is none other than Jamshedji Tata. However, we don't know how true that story is, but it is a great story to tell otherwise on walks such as these. Today, the Watson's Hotel is in a very bad state. We are unfortunately not allowed inside to see it as well. And it's considered to be one of the most dangerous buildings that might just fall down as well. And hence, no access. It had taken up illegal people, taking up various spots inside, but not anymore. We're just hoping that maybe someday it will see its past glory, but only time will tell. Till then, we can admire it as much as we can, either physically or, of course, virtually. One thing that still survives in the Watson's Hotel are the grills, and those W that you see over there stand for Watson. Only 2 or 3 of these examples survive. So maybe if it does get dismantled, I hope to probably flick one of those and keep for myself. Great. And that finally brings us to point number 20, which is going to be our last stop. And all this while I spoke about Kala Ghoda. But who or what is this Kala Ghoda? It is not that statue, because 2017 is when that statue came up. It is something that was there much earlier, more than 150 years back. Now, this is the event that basically is happening in the 1870s. And this is the Kala Ghoda area. In fact, if you still haven't recognized it, the Apollo Green is on the right. And there you can faintly see the David Sassoon Library as well. Now, what is happening in the 1870s? Well, guess who? Prince of Wales has come to Bombay, but not the one I mentioned, but his father. All right. This man is actually who goes on to become King Edward VII. And as he visits Bombay, a certain Albert Sassoon, who I mentioned, decides to donate money to actually set up something for him. And this is the result. At this particular area, the Prince of Wales is sitting on a statue, and that on a horse, and that is the statue that has been erected over here in the 1870s. Now, what does it look like? Well, it looks like this. And I've shown you the Elfinstein College and the David Sassoon Library. That's approximately where it once used to stand. Now, as this is present, the locals are also getting used to the presence of this particular statue there. They're not too concerned probably about who is sitting on the horse, but they do know that there is a horse. So the question really comes, what do we now call this area? What is this landmark really called? Well, they don't maybe want to call it the king's space. So hence they called it a horse's space, or easy to call Kala Ghoda. And that is what the name has stuck to this particular area since the 1870s and continues to be called Kala Ghoda thanks to this festival. So the Kala Ghoda statue was present here for a very long time. And as time went by, you could see even now cars coming and parking next to the Kala Ghoda statue as well. Now, finally, in the 1960s, this particular statue actually on threats of vandalism was removed, of course, post-independence, and was relocated where? Well, as I mentioned, in Baikala, next to Dr. Bhaudaji Art Museum, or the Jijamata Udyan, which is the zoo. So that is where our friend today stands, sits, on a horse, which you all can go see if you'd like to as well. But before he went there, he actually went on to make a debut for himself as well in Indian movies. So let's see what am I talking about. So if you've seen beyond the famous stars that are fixing the car over there, you will notice the Kala Ghoda statue. The old one is still very much present. This is, of course, around the 1950s. And this is the starting of the movie Chalti Ka Naam Gaadi. Great. On that note, we would like to now come to an end to this walk, and we'll be more than happy to answer your questions as well. I will now stop sharing my screens, and I really do hope you enjoyed the last 60 minutes as well.
Yeah, hi, great. Vinayak, a few questions are there. One, I think so you have already answered the question which was asked, which is why is it called Kala Ghoda? So you kept it right till the end as a mystery, which is great. Uh, there's a question, did Petit open the Parsi General Hospital? Is the question which was asked.
Okay, Bharat, maybe you want to mute yourself while I answer. Yeah. Okay, so there are donations of the Petit family that have gone into the Parsi General Hospital as well, and this is the same family that I am speaking about as well. So yes, the answer is right. Bharat, if you'd like to add anything, please do so.
No, no, that's fine. The next question was, I think so people got confused between the J.N. Petit library and the French library. So if you can clarify where are each of them and how different they are.
Sure. So the J.N. Petit Library, again, of course, is dedicated to somebody from the Petit family, but that is located on Dadabhai Naoroji Road, or what was earlier called the Hornby Road. That is a very large library, which you can see on the main road. This is a hidden away library on Forbes Street or VB Gandhi Marg in Kala Ghoda. So two different institutions altogether.
The next question is, where is the Jewish club? You mentioned the Jewish club, but where is it located?
Sure. So if you are on Mahatma Gandhi Marg or Esplanade Road, close to Kala Ghoda, there is a Fab India store that is present in that building, which is called the Jeru building. On the second or the third floor, I might be wrong, is where the Jewish club was once located. Now there are no remnants of it. So even if you try to go there, you won't find any.
There's a question which somebody asked when you were in the Bakehouse Lane, whether it was called the Bed and Breakfast Street at any point of time.
Not that I am aware of. There was a breakfast market situated not too far near the town hall as well, which was basically the bread market lane or the breakfast market, which catered to basically the barracks that were present for the British and Indian soldiers there. But I'm not sure about the bed and breakfast reference to this lane.
There was a question whether the synagogue is open to public.
Yes, in fact, it is open to public, especially after it has been restored. It is open to visitors, and you, I think, just need to carry an ID of yourselves and probably a little bit of money if you want to take photographs. But it is open to visitors.
Okay, and the Prince of Wales Museum, was it always a museum or was it some other building and then utilized for as a museum?
So the building was inaugurated to be a museum, but as it would have it, when it was opened up, it was at the same time when war had struck in the world. So during World War One, the Prince of Wales Museum was actually used as a hospital. So there are old photographs with a plus sign on top as well, but otherwise it was intended to be a museum.
Somebody mentioned that JRD Tata was not allowed entry into the Esplanade Hotel. So was it JRD or was it Jamshedji?
No, I'm pretty sure it was Jamshedji Tata because the legend, so as to speak, has it, and the timeline really matches compared to JRD Tata opening because the hotel is Jamshedji Tata's creation. So yeah.
Okay. Somebody is asking about the Jewish community, the Baghdadi Jewish community. Probably, are they still there? Do they celebrate their events the way it is? Could you let us know?
I don't think much presence of the Baghdadi Jewish community is here in Mumbai. There is, of course, a separate Jewish community called the Bene Israelis who precede, in fact, the coming of the Baghdadi Jews by many, many years in Mumbai. They are still present in different mohallas and different areas in Mumbai. However, largely, a large presence is in fact found not too far from Mumbai in Alibag as well. So yeah, that's all. There are other synagogues which cater to the Bene Israeli community, but not these ones which I mentioned.
Great. I think so. Most of the questions have been answered except for what is Rhythm House now? That's the last one we'll take.
So I believe the first floor of Rhythm House has been used as a designer showroom, if I'm not wrong, but the ground floor itself is still not operational. So I don't think there's any access to it. As I said, there are projects to revive it, but we're still yet to see what happens there.
And you cannot not answer Nikhil Katyal's question, is Watson's Hotel in any use at all now?
No, absolutely not. It is not allowing any visitors at this point, especially after an incident took place where one of the balconies of the Watson's Hotel actually fell on a Kali Pili. It's quite ironic. We're talking about Kali Pili in this walk as well, and flattened it. Fortunately, the driver was not hurt, and since then they've closed access to the hotel.
Yeah, one more question because Lakshmi is asking about membership of the library. Probably either any of these libraries, do we need membership or can you walk in? Both the libraries, David Sassoon as well as this thing, if you can answer.
Well, see, you have to be a little bit smart about it because when you walk into the library, if they ask you what you're doing, you can just say you're inquiring about membership. So there are different times of the day when the guard there is in the right mood and you can actually walk through. But of course, they would prefer people who are members to enter. Like J.N. Pettit is very particular about membership, but I think David Sassoon is still a little bit more lenient on that front.
Okay, great. I think so. Let's cut it at that because questions will keep on coming and we are already 5 minutes over the time, right? So thank you, everybody. I hope you guys enjoyed. Please do visit us on khakitours.com to find out what physical as well as virtual walks we are up to. And there's so much more to do together. So with that, we come to an end. Thank you. Hope to see you for two more events that Khaki Tours is doing. One is on food and one is on the other arts district of Mumbai, which is Girgaon. And that is really fascinating, which is there on next Friday and Tuesday when we are doing food. Please join us for both of them. If you loved what we did, please let the world know. Thank you.
Thank you everyone. Enjoy the Kala Ghoda Arts Festival.